Coin Street. You'll have a chance to meet some of your midwifery heroines, like Hannah Tizard, who did Blood to Baby, starting when she was still a student. You'll be able to meet some of the people who've made a big difference to the profession, but also to do a rally for midwifery students to make sure that they're properly looked after, properly supervised. The Royal College of Midwives report on the state of midwifery education highlighted the fact that the support and supervision of student midwives was something that can be very variable. And they actually said that the NMC should make supporting and supervising student midwives part of revalidation, because there's quite a lot of evidence that quite a lot of midwives prefer not to. And that stretches the resources and leaves some students isolated and vulnerable. And that's the kind of thing that needs to be addressed. But there'll also be quite a lot of fun and how to make the most of your time and how to look after yourself while you're a student midwife. On the 15th of November, the education bosses, the lead midwives and all the lecturers will have the Midwifery Education Conference. Now, we've come up with a special scheme there where the department, the midwifery school, can book an online license, get in a seminar room, and you can watch it collectively. Now, the way it works is that people don't sit in the seminar or lecture room all day. They drop in and out for the speakers they want to catch. No doubt donuts will be shared, but everybody in the team gets the box set afterwards. And some of the presentations are things that, if you're in midwifery education, you want to take the dean of your faculty, sit them down and replay, especially the presentation that's coming from Fiona Gibb and Heather Boer on the RCM State of Education report. So we've got to get the voice of midwifery education raised. And finally, on the 28th of November, if you're a Scot or if you want to come up from Newcastle, we've got the Scottish Festival. It's got over 400 already booked. And we have a star turn from Kate Forbes, who is an MSP, ran for the leadership of the SNP. She was the Scottish Treasurer in charge of all the money, but she had a particularly difficult postnatal experience with postnatal depression, and she's written about it, and she's talked about how the midwives helped her, and she's really, really raised the profile of it. So I think that'll be fascinating. So lots of stuff, and a weekly maternity and midwifery hour in between when Sue Macdonald will be back in charge. So that's my 10 minutes of fame, and now Sue is back in charge. So I'd like to introduce you to Sue Macdonald. Tonight she's wearing her hat as the editor of Mayes Midwifery, and she's with Gail Johnson, the other editor, or do you describe yourselves as co-editors of Mayes Midwifery? So Sue and Gail, the screen is yours. Over to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, I think what we were thinking about when we first came up with sharing our experience, and Gail we're very much a double act, Gail. We've done the book forever. Together forever, and so we'll sort of intersperse with this. But I think one of the things when we were developing the presentation we were thinking of, it's quite interesting to think about people out there watching and listening to us. There are some future and present editors and authors out there. Now, some of you aren't yet authors, aren't yet editors, but you may well be, because when you're invited to do something like author a chapter or edit a book, the first thing you think is, oh my goodness, I could never ever do that. That's something I used when I was a student midwife. But it kind of can happen because you're out there, and I know the expertise is out there. So it's delicious to be here to share just a little bit from the birth or the rebirth of our Mayes Midwifery 16th edition. And Gail, tell us a fact about the Mayes Midwifery that nobody will know.
Well, I think once it landed on my doorstep and I nearly got a hernia picking it up, first thing I did was went and weighed it, and it weighs in at a hefty 3.5 kilos.
Yay!
That's a heck of a lot of knowledge and information crammed into the space that Neil has shown us already. It's pretty hefty. Very good
Perfect.
reading also keeps the doors open.
Not such a good use of a textbook there, Gail. Anyway, before we started, we had to do some work, but also Elsevier, who are the publishers of the book, also did a lot of work, because obviously it's in their interest to make sure the book is right for the group of people who are going to be buying the book and using the book on a day-to-day basis, some of them. And these are the kind of things that they came up with. And we were aware that the courses are hugely varied, even though the student outcomes, especially in the UK, are going to be the same. But the things that the students wanted was plain and simple English. They like bulleted lists, they like boxes and headings, they like reflective exercises and case studies, because that brings the content alive and makes it easier to understand some of the quite hefty research and evidence and theory that's in there. They also like a few up-to-date references, which we do too. The diversity and inclusion was a big one that came up, but also was very near to our heart. We had to align to the NMC standards, and we had to have them they were approved by students. So there was a lot of groundwork and a lot of thinking before we started working. But as both Gail and I are teachers, we have to make that confession. We also were aware we needed to give student readers, or midwife readers actually, what they wanted, but also what they needed, which may or may not be the same thing. Sometimes it's a wee bit different. Gail, did you want to say anything there?
Well, I just think one of the challenges when you're looking at a textbook, if you're reading a novel or something, you go through page by page. And obviously with a textbook, sometimes you just need to access the information quickly. So you need to get to the chapter you're looking for and pull out the information that hopefully you've already read through, but just as a reminder. And this information that we got from the review that Elsevier did and talking to the students is exactly what they want, because you can just dip in and out. And here's a list as a reminder of what you've read, but to make sense. But it is the application to practice, I think, that was so important. It's all very well having this knowledge, but it's that, so what's that got to do with me when I'm out in practice? And hopefully how we've brought it together just does that.
I think it's very important that people don't just keep it on a bookshelf, that they do dip into it. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and not just as students too, as you said, Sue. I mean, it's something that, I know that you and I, Sue, have always used it when we're teaching or in practice as well. So we just keep it out there.
Yay. Well, we went back to the 15th edition. We can honestly say that we've read both of these books cover to cover, because we have. But we were very aware that from the feedback we got from student readers and from teachers and from midwives, that it was very highly evaluated the last time. But and at that point we had a quite a different approach to women and babies. We'd used contemporary society being acknowledged, all the stuff around psychology and sociology and sexuality, and the choice and patterns of care. And of course that's been changing. It just seems as though it's been going on forever. It's just been changing. And you kind of, when you read one of the older books, you kind of realize how much it has been changing. You have to make sure it's keeping up with it. And one of the big things for me was about the strong physiology applied to practice, applied to maternal, fetal and neonatal care. So you'll see a lot about that in this next edition also. And also that the thing that is also important to remember, because this has meant an enormous amount of work for our wonderful authors, is it's not just in the book, which is huge. It's huge and thick, but also there's a whole chunk of things online. Every chapter has got some online materials. It's got online quizzes. It's got online additional references and research and articles that they couldn't fit in. Because if our authors had put everything they wanted to put in the book, it would be even bigger and probably would have been an 8-kilo baby. So we have to be careful on that one. Okay, and we know that, I mean, part of the responsibility is knowing it's all over the world and people access it in small or larger degrees. I mean, obviously it's UK focused, but we were very aware both in the use of it, but also in what is included, to make sure that there was international focus, because there are some things, gosh, that other countries do better than the UK, and we needed to acknowledge that and make clear of it.
And certainly, you know, the international research that will inform practice globally, recognising that, and of course some of our authors are also non-UK based too, so bringing in their expertise.
That makes it really interesting. Okay, and so it began, the 16th edition. It feels a lifetime away, I have to say, that we sat down and started looking at our authors and choosing people. Some people wanted to stay as authors, some people had moved on to other things. So it gave us a nice opportunity to have some existing authors and some new authors, which was lovely. But also we were really happy about this, is having chapters where there was more than one author, which got tricky sometimes, because sometimes, you know, people had a different viewpoint, but actually it gave every chapter a strength, and that was really good. Obviously, research and evidence was really strong within there, and we were really working very hard on reflecting society and the women served by midwives and families, of course. And we were very focused on language and the need to address unconscious racism and bias, because that became an incredibly important part of what we were doing. And that linked in, I have to say, to images. And that was a real challenge, because it became really clear to us as we were thinking about it and working with the authors, that there weren't the images that we wanted out there. It's much harder to get properly black and brown images, not just the ordinary white. I shouldn't say ordinary, it's not ordinary, but the ones that have been for years and years. Even in the line drawings, we were having to request and say, we can't just have these very white images, because that doesn't reflect our midwifery and maternity services. But it did challenge us, and I hope we've started. I don't think we've got it perfect, but we're on the roadway. Sorry,
I think so. We started that process with the 15th edition, trying to challenge the language, trying to be more inclusive and have that understanding. And we started that process of looking for images with the 15th edition. And yet, you know, several years down the line, we were still finding it was a big struggle. So although we're aware of it and we're raising awareness of it and people are talking about it, we haven't yet got the solution to it. But it's something that we and other authors and publishers are desperately working on, because it's so important, and is reflected, as Neil said, you know, in the Embrace reports, and the 5 times more. We're just letting women down by not addressing this.
Yeah. Okay, and then the other headaches we had, I will mention, is the copyright headaches, because that became an issue about making sure that all material we were using was copyright okay, we had permission for everything. Sounds very simple, but when you're looking at 72 odd chapters with very varying images and different tables, some were easier to get than others, and that was an additional thing for us to chase up. I don't know. And then now this image should be a little cat typing madly, because that's what a lot of the process was about. I couldn't get a moving cat. But we looked at, before we invited our authors, we carefully reviewed them, looked at what was needed and provided key things. We didn't want to hamper people, but we wanted to make sure they knew the direction that the chapter needed to go in, especially our newer chapters, which needed to, well, it's almost like a blank canvas. Blank canvases can be quite difficult to start with. And some of the chapters needed a general update. Some of them had massive changes within practice and needed a lot more work. So we were able to kind of give that guidance. And we needed, I guess, for some of our authors to make sure people understood that it was different to a textbook's different to an article. And those of you who are listening who might be thinking, well, it's just a bit of writing and a few references. It's a bit different because you have to give students who may be the readers a kind of a roadmap through the topic. You can't just go into huge theoretical debates. I think Gail wants to say something. I have that feeling.
Well, I was just going back to sort of looking at how we talked about the content, Sue, and looked at what was what. I know sometimes when you see student forums and they, students finish their training and then they sell on their old copy of the textbook. I think it's sometimes fail to understand how quickly the evidence changes around certain topics. And that's why we need to reflect that and how the chapters need to show. We're not just updating them for the fun of it, it's that the evidence has changed. And so that we're keeping the readers revised with fresh information all the time. And that, I think that's one of the challenges, that they are reading the right content, and that somebody that's coming in to write for us is aware of how things have changed, because when you have a textbook that you really like, you want to stick with that format, but sometimes you've just got to look at it differently to get the information over in a more, I suppose, an easier way sometimes.
Yeah. And I think it's also hard. I don't know whether our authors might say the same, but I know I found it difficult to drop bits of old knowledge in the chapters that I was writing, because new stuff had come along and you just can't fit everything in. And of course, the other thing that the publishers needed to understand is some of our references were a bit older than 10 years, where there hadn't been any further research. We were using sometimes older bits of research. The key thing was references had to be perfect. And I have to say, Gail and I are absolutely obsessive about references. And you'll hear more about that at some point, I'm sure. The next sort of thing that we worked on, once we'd invited people to be part of the journey, was we wanted to kind of get a community, because it can be really lonely when you're writing something. And we wanted to make sure people felt informed, but also could inform each other and share information, especially if one person was writing a chapter, they could share one snippet with other people. So we chose a kind of closed Facebook group, and that in itself was interesting because a lot of people applied to be part of it that weren't our authors. So it was obviously very interesting, but we didn't let anyone else join. So it was closed and safe, but it also meant people could share new bits of research that were coming along, new things from NICE, which was really important. And also sharing things that were difficult that we could debate a bit and kind of understand a bit more. And we also organised a whole series of seminars, and we had lovely presentations from Tina Closton, and I just want to say Errol, because that's how we know Dr. Errol, Bernie DeVal and Joy Kemp, who were also our authors, but who shared their knowledge of their particular chapter. So it gave us a kind of different feel, and that was really nice. And it was a way of us coming together, keeping up with how people were doing with their timelines, and also just sharing and feeling as though we're still together. And we're still running the Facebook page. And I've just posted the Embrace, I want to say CMAC, without the Embrace, and I was going to do the APPGD. I haven't done that yet, but it's still a way. We want to carry on with a bit of sharing, I hope, or I do. I like to share. Gail, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good opportunity to see what else is going on. So although the book is now finished, it just means the authors are still out there producing some really good content, and that keeps us thinking about what else is out there and what else we might need to be doing, and and hopefully we might be able to support other midwives in continuing their writing skills. So I think that's a good way of doing it. And before we move on, I'd just like to point out this little image here on the right of the new parents and the baby. That's my grandson.
Oh,
So just got to get a little plug out there for baby Jude.
thank you, Gail.
Who is nearly 4.
Oh,
now.
crikey.
Yeah,
That just shows how long it takes.
How long it's taken, yeah.
The gestation's a bit longer than normal.
Yeah.
For us, I mean. And then just to share some of the challenges, and I know that we're running, I knew because we're talking a lot, the challenges, of course, we were asking key people in the profession, the busiest people. And if you ask a busy person, they've got to juggle their whole life. And that's really hard, especially with deadlines. Some of our deadlines kind of moved, and it wasn't anything to do with Gail and I. It was because of the wider world. I suspect it was probably to do with COVID and after effects in the rest of the publishing world, but we just had to deal with that. And of course, there were things like new documents and policies coming through, like, for example, NICE published something fairly soon, just as we were about to finish proofing. And I think anxiety about writing for a textbook, I think it's always there for all of us, because will we get it right? Have we remembered everything? Have we used something old or outdated? And that's always an anxiety. So the new and the old knowledge. And of course the references, because as I said, Gail and I are obsessive, and a lot of the time was spent in matching all the references through and making sure they were all correct and they were all the same and all consistent, which is always a bit of a pain.
And I think as far as deadlines, sorry, Sue, just going back to deadlines.
I'll put them here.
the authors have a deadline, but as editors, you have a deadline, and as editors, we're juggling 72 chapters, and on the whole, most of the authors perhaps had 1 or maybe 2 or 3, and so I think it's about understanding how your individual work fits into the whole collective within a textbook, and the impact that you can have on the whole production of it, which can be quite frustrating. And you write something, submit something, and you're very pleased with it, and generally so are Sue and I, but there's nearly always something that needs to be reviewed, and it's about looking at those deadlines, thinking, oh, I've got plenty of time, and we all know how time goes so quickly. So when somebody does ask you to write something, start it straight away.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think that it is such a challenge, and also the proofing took a long time, and it was late coming through for us, for all of us, and it was a big task. So eventually we got published in May and June. I'm very conscious of the time, and Neil probably will send up a sign to me, but I just wanted to share, now we have 80 authors, 80 wonderful authors, and they were all fantastic and really patient with us squeaking at them and saying, oh, can you do this, can you whatever, at very short notice. We haven't got them all here, but the plan is to have a massive collage of every single author, hopefully clutching a copy of the book if they can possibly manage the lifting of it, so we can kind of show that at a future event, because I think it's wonderful to see people's faces and who they are. This is the great and the good in midwifery and maternity services, and it's so nice to have everyone there. Some people did some very creative things, like Alicia did a lovely clip on Twitter, wasn't it, and Instagram, I suspect, as well. And also Laura Godfrey and Isaacs and Sally Pizarro also did a lovely thing. So there's a lot of creativity in this group of people, and they are fantastic. No word of anything. So we'll say a huge thank you to our readers and the team at Elsevier. We had Poppy, who started the whole process, which was then taken over by Andrea Ake, and Shruti Raj was the project manager, making sure everything was coming through to us as it did. So it was a process of ups and downs, but when you go into that and I know Gail would want to share that, probably going into a bookshop. Should we finish off with Gail and her bookshop?
Well, yeah, it's just one of those exciting moments when you go into Waterstones and you see a copy of the book. It's just very special. I have been known to be standing there getting my photograph taken. People think I'm completely bonkers, but then anybody that knows me would know that anyway. So, and it is a labor of love, but then so is the profession, isn't it? So
it is.
It's a joy to be working with such fantastic people.
And what perfect way to end. Thank you, Neil.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Gail. So there you are. If you're planning to be an author, you get the idea of the journey that you have to go on, but the company that you'll be in is absolutely wonderful. I did have a picture in my mind of 80 authors running across a football pitch to a tiny door at the end, with Sue and Gail trying to get them all in the right order with all their notes and get them through the door into their suitable chapters all at once. Our next contribution is from Lyn Jones, who is one of the authors. We're going to hear from three, and we're going to hear from Lyn and Alicia and Kylie. Lyn is currently an associate lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University, and she's also practicing as a midwife at the Northwest Anglia Foundation Trust. But today, Lyn, you're here wearing your hat as a worldwide author. Lyn, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue and Gail, as well, for the opportunity to actually discuss what it was like being an author. I had written nothing for publication before the 15th edition, when I was asked to write the chapter by a colleague who had written it previous to me. And it was really very, very daunting because, as you say, it's a seminal textbook for midwives. And the thought of actually being part of that for eternity, essentially, because there will always be someone that's got a 16th or a 15th copy. I've still got mine from when I trained like 30 odd years ago. It was really quite special. This second one we've just done, I found much easier. It was because I was kind of editing my own chapter from previous. Doing the 15th was exciting because I was able to kind of completely rewrite the chapter and put my own spin on it. So that was really exciting to be able to do that and have a format of how I taught that chapter anyway. So that was quite nice. Doing this chapter was more of a challenge because my chapter was called Prolapse. And as most people will realise, there's not a huge amount of research gone into cord prolapse that's up to date and current. So that was a huge challenge to actually find resources that either challenged some of the practices that we were doing or basically said, yes, that's the same, that's nothing's changed. This is still best practice. This is still the best way of dealing with this. So it really was quite a challenge. And like Gail, I have to say, the first time I saw it in a book, it was in a library and in a shop in Oxford, and I was so excited. I took it off the shelf and was finding my chapter and getting my husband to take a picture of me in the shop with the book, with the chapter. It was just very, very exciting and really, really special. For anyone that's asked to do it, don't let that fear of writing put you off. Because as I say, I hadn't written anything for publication before. I'd written something since, a chapter in a different book, which again was a completely different format, but I wasn't quite so daunted by that because I'd had all the support and help. Gail and Sue are amazing, as are the team at Elsevier as well. I really found this time the addition of the seminars and the Facebook page and all of that support a huge help. Whereas there wasn't so much of that, I don't remember the first time, or maybe it was just that I was still teaching at ARU a lot, so I didn't have time to actually dip into it. I would say if you're asked to do it, as Gail said, start writing straight away. don't think you have got plenty of time, because when you're asked to start and you see that deadline is February, you think, oh, I've got 4 or 5 months yet, I've got ages yet before that deadline. It comes upon you extremely quickly, and then you have to get it back. Gail was very good at sending me emails saying, how are you getting on with that chapter? Are we anywhere close? So there was lots of support, lots of reminders, and lots of help when I got stuck with things. If I wasn't really sure about something, anyone who's ever written anything, referencing is pretty much my Achilles heel. You may love it, Gail and Sue, but it's not my favoured bit. And I have to say, I found the referencing correctly probably the most stressful bit, to just make sure that it was in the format that it needed to be in, to be able to get it published. And creating the online resources wasn't as daunting. I'm founder of a YouTube channel called Motivational Midwife that's got a lot of resources in there. So I'm relatively tech savvy. So I didn't find that as daunting, doing the online resources, as actually writing for the first time. Oh, you've gone mute, Neil.
Okay, thank you, Lyn.
You're
and
welcome.
a reference to Lyn's YouTube channel will be in the resources for anybody who wants to go. And quite interesting how, even though it's a major publication, the multimedia world is coming in the creation. So our next speaker is Alicia Burnett. Alicia will be familiar to people on Maternity and Midwifery Hour. Alicia has written for the forum, and she's appeared several times over the past few years. So, Alicia, the screen is yours. Tell us your story and your experience of stepping up to writing for Mayes Midwifery.
Thank you very much, Neil. I've written down everything I'm going to say because I am notorious for ad-libbing and oversharing. So that's not going to happen today. So my chapter is co-authored with both Gail and Sue. So it's like a mega super wonderful chapter. Writing for a textbook, and not just any textbook, but Mayes Midwifery, was equal parts challenging and equal parts exciting. So when I was invited to write my chapter, I was a third-year student midwife. So the invitation was a huge compliment, but also a huge undertaking with final year and all the drama and intensity that brings. But I also lost my father while I was writing my chapter and gave birth to my daughter. So there was a lot going on. It was a flurry of activity and emotion. And at times, I was completely overwhelmed, but funnily enough, not by the writing, but everything else that was going on around me. And writing this chapter actually anchored me to midwifery at a time when I wasn't sure how I was going to juggle being a mum and being a midwife. I just couldn't see how I was going to do this. And I really did consider walking away from midwifery, but because I was writing this chapter, see, I'm oversharing already, and I've written this down. Yeah, I just didn't see. I know that there are mothers are midwives. It's a thing. It's been a thing for years, but I just didn't see how I was going to do it. So writing this chapter kept me grounded. And imposter syndrome hit really, really, really hard. I struggled to muster the confidence to even submit a draft to Sue. There was this little voice telling me that she's going to laugh at you. This is rubbish. You can't submit this. What's this? This isn't good enough. And when I did finally submit a draft, it was fine. It was okay. It was all right. And one thing I did do, I made sure to do in this chapter, I couldn't resist the opportunity to shout out about the activism of some of the student midwives that were around at the time, who are now actually qualified midwives. And I also used it as an opportunity to argue for more ethnic diversity in both midwifery teaching materials and the midwifery workforce. When I was writing the chapter, I really thought about the things that I wish I'd known when I was a student, including... So it can be a bit odd. I've been a nurse before, and I've been a student midwife. I've been a student nurse and a student midwife, and the way things are organised can be a bit bizarre or appear that way. So the first time I was, when I was a student nurse, I lived in halls, and everybody else was partying and up all hours, but I couldn't do that because I had to go to placement. I just couldn't, and I had all the assignments and placement. So when you're a student midwife, it can come as a bit of a shock, all of this. Shifts, I have to be aware for what time, and my uniform has to be ironed. It can all come at you really, really fast. So I wanted to write about why midwifery education is structured the way it is, and a bit about why competition for midwifery programs is so fierce, or was so fierce. I don't know if it's still that way. Because I remember reading something when I wanted to apply, and midwifery was the hardest of all of the healthcare programs to get into. It was midwifery, and then pediatric nursing, and then right at the top was adult. That was the easiest. Adult nursing was the easiest course to get onto. And also where things like the 2,300 practice hours came from, because as a student, some of these things can seem a bit arbitrary, and you're like, why am I having to do this? So I wanted to give a bit of background about that. I've got a few more notes here. Sorry, I'm wittering on. This is really important, I want to mention, actually. I also saw the chapter as an opportunity to mention the impact that COVID had on students and midwifery education, because unless you lived through it, some of the things that happened were pretty unbelievable. You had members of the NMC appearing on podcasts with students, and the chief midwifery officer and the chief nursing officer for England appeared on a webinar to answer students' questions. That would never have happened before 2020. I'm so sure of it. So for anyone that's considering writing, I think a good place to start is to ask yourself, what do you know about the topic? What do you want to know about the topic? And how can you, as an individual, add something new to what the world already knows? Last thing, for any budding writers out there, if you want to write for publication, just do it.
Okay. Thank you, Alicia. And of course, you have been on a journey writing for the forum. I'm always very interested in how much writing people do in nursing and midwifery courses. I mean, there used to be an old joke that the only thing that a university education taught you was how to do a 1,500 word to 3,000 word essay, and that discipline could more or less carry you through life. I'm not sure that that's the case now. And I forgot to say that Alicia is now working at Tommy's and as a midwife there, and no doubt we'll see a lot more of her. We'll be back for questions. Can I remind people to put your questions in the chat, and they'll be passed up, and I'll put them to the panel at the end. So our final contributor who contributed is Kylie Watson. Kylie's a consultant midwife at Manchester University NHS Trust, and now a global author. So Kylie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Neil. And Alicia, what an inspiration you are. I just wanted to say, yeah, that's amazing and brilliant to have a then student to be involved in the authorship of the book. So thank you very much for having me here. And I guess like the others have all said, what an honour to be asked to be an author in this incredible textbook. And so in 2021, I think it was, I got this email from somebody with a Gmail address, and it had a number in it as well. And I read it, and it said, "Oh, hi, Kylie. We wondered if you'd like to be the author for a chapter in Mayes." And I was sharing an office at that point, and I said to my colleague in the office, I said, "I've just got this weird spam email asking me to be an author," because you get loads of spam kind of asking to write for journals and things. So I was like, and I thought, oh, it says it's Gail Johnson. I'll just Google who Gail Johnson is. And sure enough, Gail worked for the RCM. And so I thought, oh, I better reply. But I couldn't quite believe that I'd been asked to be an author in this textbook, which I had as a student midwife in New Zealand, which wasn't on the list of countries that you shared before. But yes, it's used in New Zealand and Australia, definitely. And so that was the first shock to be asked, and I was the author of the second stage of birth, which again, I thought, gosh, that's, you know, that's the moment of the birth of the baby. What an absolute honor and privilege. And I'd spent a lot of my career working in intrapartum settings right across the kind of continuum of caring for women at home and within hospital and birthing centres. And I suppose the next big shock was finding out that the previous author of the chapter was Sue Down, who I had very much admired and respected for a while, and didn't actually know Sue then. I do know Sue now. So I thought, gosh, that's some fairly big shoes to fill. However, I emailed Sue to say, been asked to be the author of this chapter, and she was fab and said, you know, that's great, and you know, you'll do a great job. So that was lovely to contact Sue. So yeah, it's a very interesting process, as I think Lyn alluded to be the author of a chapter that somebody has previously written, because the framework of that chapter pretty much remained the same, because it's the second stage. It's not, you know, it hasn't changed for centuries really, but in terms of the evidence around how we care for women in the second stage, you know, that did need updating and keeping some of the very seminal pieces that, you know, we still refer to, but updating in terms of some of the new evidence that's out there, particularly around positions that women might be in, care of the perineum. That crossed over with one of the other chapters. So it was about, yeah, just looking at all that evidence again and updating the chapter and trying to put a little bit, I suppose, of my own spin and feelings and thoughts into it as well, which I think is important when you're a new author for an existing chapter. And we had some images in my chapter which we did change, and the woman is upright in those, which I think is very important. And we did change some of the images and made them just slightly different, which was helpful. Yeah, the seminars were really brilliant to be able to connect with the other authors, and we did really feel like we were part of a big family of people all kind of in it together, working towards the final publication of this amazing textbook. So it was a really fabulous experience, and I feel very honoured to be part of that, and absolutely would encourage anybody that's asked or thinking about it to definitely go for it. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks very much, Kylie. So let's go to questions and comments. The first question I've got here is from Julia Colin, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I suppose this is for you and Gail, really, Sue. She asks about how can we ensure that all mental health care providers are given a mental health first aid course. Now, you expanded the reach of the content of this to include much more of the context and other themes. How have you addressed that mental health issue in this edition? Sue, you first.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a whole chapter on mental health and well-being, which has been prepared by Catherine Guttridge, who's well known within midwifery maternity services. And we felt that we needed to focus not just on when things go wrong, but how we can kind of nurture the woman and the family through. But it did come in several chapters, because it is so important. I can't recall though the mental health the kind of in training that Julia's talking about. Yeah. The first aid kit. I know it's something that's used within nursing more, I think, than in education, I think, more than in midwifery. But I
think so. In some of the online resources, we've got links to support networks and things. So I think there is something there. So it's not just about recognising the mental health issues of the women and families that we're caring for, but understanding the impact that the whole job has on people and their own mental health. And I'm sure we've come across a few of the links. So I think there is some quite strong stuff in the online resources as well.
So that anyone who has the book has access to the online materials.
Yeah.
But it's
very good. Okay, we've got a comment from Tracy Cafferkay. Alicia, your journey sounds so inspirational. Thank you for sharing. I'm just starting out as a first-year student midwife, doing my first draft. Now, I have to ask this next question to our three authors a bit carefully, because obviously Alicia started writing early in her career, and Lyn has confessed to not really starting until quite late. So, Kylie, I can see that you're still quite young. When did you actually step over the writing threshold? When do you say that you really, was it in a master's, or when did you really tackle your writing fears?
Yes, I would say probably when I did a master's in advanced midwifery practice in a while ago in 2007. I did that, and I suppose got a real love for writing, actually, when you really get in the zone and you dedicate some time to it and everything kind of comes together. I do really enjoy it. I think sometimes you feel daunted by it, but actually sitting down and just starting is often the best thing to do. Just start, just write something. The first sentence is often the hardest. And then often you're away. So yeah, I suppose it was then, and it comes and goes a bit. I'd like to have a bit more time to do more writing, but yeah.
And Lyn, you said that you started writing quite late, and I wrote a book with the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, and Trevor Clay, and he was very daunted by writing. He said he couldn't write more than 1,000 words. But actually, when I looked at his career, he had presented endless long reports. You know, he'd been a chief nurse. He'd been involved in writing and contributing. He just didn't recognize it as writing a chapter as an author. In your own history, I mean, you must have had plenty of experience of reports and various other things.
Yes, and when I trained, it's in the days before degrees existed. So I trained a very long time ago, and so when I way back when I did the then EMB 997, which was teaching and assessment, and I sat with a lot of other, they were all nurses, I think, apart from me. And the tutor said, and your assignment will be a 2,500 word essay. I went, what? And I was mortified. And I was the only one that was completely horrified by 2,500 words. Every other person in the room was not fazed by that at all. And I think, like Kylie, when I did my master's, I think that's probably when I got more into writing. And when I was a supervisor of midwives, when you had to do reports and investigations and report writing for that, it had to be done in a particular way. So I probably have had more writing experience than I think. You know. But what I would like to say actually is, you know, don't anyone let their age put them off saying yes. You know, I'm 63, and so I was in my late 50s when I was first asked to write this. So that's the first time of me writing for publication in my late 50s. So you're never too old to have a go at it. And I really do think it's, you know, don't ever put yourself down just because you think, oh no, I'm done now, I'm too old to do that sort of thing.
And Alicia, have you ever added up the amount of writing that you've done? Because you've written for us, you're an activist. You know, obviously a lot of your media is Instagram and online, but have you ever added up how much writing you did before this?
What's that thing called? There's a thingy and it collates all of the publications that you've ever done. I've forgotten what the website is called now, but that keeps track for me. And whenever I do go on there, because it gives you an alert when someone cited you, and I do like to pop on there and go, oh, another one. That's great. Because I never saw myself as an author. I love to read, but I never thought I'd be able to show my daughter, look, mummy did this.
Very good.
That's
Gail,
how I work.
Gail, you were going to
I'm just thinking that we're talking about chapters and articles, but I think it's about finding something that you have an interest in that will help you to write. And you don't have to go out there into sort of major publications. But I think my first paper that I got published was just an opinion paper on something that was important to me. And I had it published in the Nursing Times. So you can start small and just get involved and realize that, and it's usually when you have a passion about something, and you've heard that from our authors, they're passionate about what they do, then I think that helps to get your writing going.
Right, here's a question from Jenny Hall, one of our regulars. So you've just finished this huge tome, but what one thing do you wish could be expanded on the book, or something you think is missing? So Gail, you first, go on.
Something's missing.
I think it needs to be bigger. I can see this as at the moment the book is in sections, and I think this is like a whole series, that we can probably do 3.5 kilos on basically each of the sections. But as far as things missing, I think just to be able to analyze some of the evidence in a little bit more depth. Sometimes we've got the evidence there, and then we have to send people away to do that for themselves.
Any thoughts from you, Sue? It's a horrible question.
Well, it is a horrible question, because we have looked at having volumes, but of course mostly people want one thing that they can grab into, and of course now people can use it online using through Kindle and everything. I don't know. I think probably more pictures. I like pictures and images, and I think we needed. I mean, we have a lot and a lot more and a lot of colour now. For the first few editions, it didn't have colour, but it has now. But I'd probably, if we had more space, put a few more pictures, because if you see things, you can understand what's happening.
I've got a question here from Rachel Fusella from I think it's University of Belfast. What opportunities are there for student midwives to build their published writing portfolios? So first of all, a bit of an answer from me. You can write for the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. We are always desperate to get blogs and articles reflecting student experience. That's where to start. But Alicia, where can student midwives start to build their publishing and writing portfolios? I mean, what circles are you active in that writing for one another is the way to start, I think? So, Alicia?
So there's a journal called the Student Midwife Journal, and that's actually where I started off my writing career. I wrote a paper when I was in my second year about sickle cell. I struggled to get help to publish it, so I ended up there. Ended up on the editorial board, which is actually made up of other student midwives and newly qualified midwives. So it's a really safe space for you to submit something and get feedback from it, from your peers. It can be quite daunting to submit to like a really prolific journal because you're worried about being judged. But when you're being judged by your peers, you are able to receive their feedback in a less soul-crushing way. So that's a good place to start, the Student Midwife Journal.
Yeah, big shout out for Maternity and the work that they do around student midwifery, and they're all out at the European Midwifery Education Conference in Athens, and they've opened up their publications in Australia, so you really can go global. Well, you won't believe it, but the hour has whizzed past, and so I would like to thank all our contributors. Sue Macdonald, who will be hopefully back here next week. Gail Johnson for her work in creating the 3.5 kilogram baby that is Mayes Midwifery. To Lyn and to Kylie and Alicia for sharing their quite different journeys and getting the message over It's never too early or never too late to start, or, you know, it's never too early to start from the other side of the world, Kylie. And so thank you to all of you. And I'll just do a few roundup announcements at the end. We will be back next week when we will be doing the examination of the newborn, preparing parents. And the week after that, on advocating self-care following caesarean sections. And the C-section rate is going up and up. And in some hospitals, anecdotally, it's beginning to reach 50%. So a lot of follow-up there compared to our mothers' generations, perhaps. And then after that, tackling birth trauma prevention, tips, tools, and actions for all. And after the parliamentary debate, that is very important. You'll be able to get a copy of all of this through the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. And it'll also be published on a variety of podcasts on Friday morning. If you're a student midwife, get in touch about the Student Midwifery Festival in London on the 8th, but also available online. And a couple of student midwife associations are booking lecture theatres so that they can watch it in a group and ask questions and eat donuts, no doubt. Midwifery education on the 15th, the same. Make sure you get your departmental license. There's a special discount for all the universities and colleges that have MATFLIX. And then finally, the Scottish Festival. So a final thank you to all our guests. It's been really fascinating. So really, since the Lancet report in 2014, there has been a justified explosion in maternity and midwifery research. We did the Maternity Research Conference for the Department of Health, which had over 600 researchers online who were working with King's College and the NHS. I think, as Kylie mentioned, it is quite remarkable that something that is so fundamental as maternity and midwifery didn't have more research allocated to it. And I'll just leave you with one final story. A long time ago, when I was a student, one of the most interesting phenomenons, I did English and history and all the uncertain ethical and political arguments in the world. But the medical students always had to write one piece on the ethics of medicine. And they couldn't find the answer at the back of the book. And they used to come running to all of us in humanities to write their 1,500-word ethics for them. So don't think and don't feel like an imposter if you're a nurse or a midwife, because the medics were just as terrified of writing as anybody else. And on that lovely thought, I'd like to thank everybody and good evening.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and I always try as hard as I can to support this excellent platform that's so flexible, that's responsive, that's contemporary, that's in people's homes, in people's pockets, and in people's hands, wherever they happen to be.